The Porsche Sport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience soul electrified.
Hi, it's Kevin Estre.
It's Jörg Bergmeister.
It's Leite Vorde.
It's Timo Bernhard.
And you're listening to the Porsche Sport Podcast
with Peter Mackay
and Hayley Edmonds.
Hello and welcome to the Porsche Sport Podcast, the show about all things Porsche in motor racing. Today we've got all the team here for a bit of a catch-up of what's been going on in the world of Porsche Motorsport the last couple of weeks. Joining me, Peter Mackay, on the show today is Tim Fullbrook from the Racing Blog to talk about all things IMSA, and our resident ELMS expert and lady about the paddock, Hayley Edmonds. I don't know if is that the right way to describe you, Hayley, the lady about the paddock? That could mean something quite different.
I mean, as long as it's contextualised, of course.
For clarity, listeners, what I mean by that is that Hayley knows everything that's going on in the ELMS paddock. She knows all the drivers, etc., and nothing more than that. Why don't we start then with the ELMS? Hayley, oh dear, good start. Why don't we start with the ELMS? You're in Monza at the weekend. Tell us about that.
That's right. Monza, so the second time in Italy this year, as Hungaroring was taken off the calendar for reasons I think that I didn't need to go into. Noted well is because of what's happening in Ukraine. Anyway, and I think it was possibly one of the best ELMS races I've ever been a part of as in the paddock. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Every single class, and just so much going on. It was such a great race with regards to strategy, with regards to driving. Absolutely brilliant. And I strongly, if you haven't watched it, then I strongly advise that you go back and take and watch it on YouTube, because it's free on YouTube, on the LMS YouTube channel. Absolutely a blinding race.
Okay, and Porsche, of course, Porsche are pretty well represented in the ELMS with the 911 RSRs. How did they fare in the race in the Italian sunshine?
Some well, some very well, and some not so well. I think that what was, of course, a great result. It was actually a change. They didn't actually make it to the top step of the podium, because initially in GTE, it was the number 60 Iron Lynx that made it to the finish line first. However, after being pushed to the pit lane by the number 83, which is, of course, Iron Dames Ferrari, which is a breach of the Article 15.11 of the 2022 ELMS sporting regulations, and Article 2.5 of the FIA International Sporting Code, they were disqualified. So, which meant that car number 77, it was now the winner, the official winner of the 4 hours of Monza, and car number 18, Absolute Racing, finished third on the podium. So a very good result for those three. However, for the car number 93, it was a very short-lived race, because after 16 minutes of racing, there was contact made with number 55 Spirit of Race car of Duncan Cameron. And they made contact on the exit of Ascari. And the Duncan made contact with Michael's car, and he spun into a curb and lost grip, and the RSR 19 sustained extremely bad damage. So the good news is that Michael is okay, but of course, the car was very damaged, and it meant they couldn't carry on with the race. And unfortunately, it was only after 16 minutes. So, Zach, for example, Zachary Robuchon, who is one of the three drivers. Of course, it's Ricard Leet, Fassbender, and Zachary. He'd come all the way from Canada with regards to driving, not really much apart from, free practice. So, as I say, highs and lows from Porsche over the weekend at ELMS, but very happy to see the car number 77 back on the top step of the podium. I think it was their first. They got pole as well. I think it was their first pole since Barcelona last year, if I'm not mistaken. So great. I interviewed Jimmy Bruni, as you can probably see for those who are watching on YouTube behind me. And, I did say what a fantastic result getting pole it was for the team. And he said, well, Christian Reed, just like myself, the older we get, the faster we get. So there we go.
a statement, a big statement from me. He's on a bit of a roll, is Jimmy Bruni right now, Hayley, because there was starting to be questions starting to rise. He's been with Porsche for a while. He's one win with Porsche before Le Mans this year, and then all of a sudden, it's all seems to be going right for our resident Italian.
That's right. So in WEC, I think their first outing in the RSL 19 actually was in Silverstone. I can't remember, was it in
2019, correct? Yes, yeah. September the 1st. Yes.
And then they went on to win. Their next victory was 24 Hours of Le Mans this year. And then in Monza, they drove fantastically well. Lorenzo Ferrari, Christian Reed, and of course, Jimmy Bruni. I don't know whether that could be related to the fact that he's maybe showing, I don't know, maybe he's just really showing what he's capable of. We know what he's capable of. He's a fantastic driver. Is he just maybe a bit like, has he missed out on the hypercar? I don't know anything definitively. I don't know exactly what for a Porsche have planned, because there are 2 seats left, right?
There's endurance seats left, yeah, by the looks of it. So they've named their full-time drivers, but endurance seats appears to be
so vacant. I know who I think one of them may be. But, it's quite a sensitive time right now in Porsche, especially for those who might be a bit more mature. As he said himself, I'm not insinuating that he is a more mature driver, but he did say that himself. So I don't know, but, maybe he's right. Maybe the older they get, the faster they do get.
Tim, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think we've seen that particularly in GT racing, you can have a really long career and never really, not get better, but never lose it really. Someone like Jerome Blakemolen just seems to be as good as he has been ever. There's just a lot of drivers that stick around in GT racing for a long time. It is that place where you can have a longer career. It'd be a shame if we didn't see Bruni in that in the future. I don't think we're going to lose him from something. Hope we don't lose him for anything Porsche related. I don't know. Maybe he's just too good to take out of a GT seat. Like many, I was maybe a little bit surprised not to see him amongst the gaggle pushed up. Yeah, like we say, there's that endurance seat available. But I think he's really hit form this year, isn't he? It's pretty impressive stuff.
Well, let's. I'm sure we'll link back to the European world of endurance racing later on in the show. But let's go stateside, where things are going pretty swimmingly at the moment for Porsche. Of course, winners of the Daytona 24 Hours in the GTD category in GTD and GTD Pro, of course, with the Wright Motorsport team and the Pfaff Motorsport team. But Pfaff are having an amazing season, and Tim, that continued last weekend at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park.
Absolutely. It was a dominant weekend for Pfaff Motorsports and the plaid Porsche, obviously on home ground as well, returning back to the Canadian circuit for the first time since 2019. So I wonder if there was that added bit of home motivation amongst the squad as they're on their in their backyard really to go racing. Honestly, there was no fault, no slip up at all with their weekend. It was not on the perfect race weekend for the team, pole position, and then come the race, which CTMP, Mosport, whatever you want to call it, which is a pretty difficult track when it comes to traffic. There's some very hairy moments, particularly through like turn 1 and 2, which are these very fast sweeping corners, downhill, cambered, the elevation, drops and then flattens out again. If you're in a GT car, you're kind of stuck to your line, and then you get this flock of prototypes buzzing around you and trying to find the space. And then later on in the lap where you have the Moss hairpin, which is a really tricky kind of double right-hander that tightens, your rally notes would be kicking off, your co-driver would be shouting at you, so you knew that it was going to really tighten up in the next section. There's moves going on there. And so as a GT driver, it must be very difficult to know where to place the car and how to get it. And we saw a few kind of bumps and scrapes, as is typical in IMSA racing, but the number 9 Pfaff Porsche was just out of any drama, out of any dodgy moments, any scares, any slight hint that the race might not be going their way. They didn't have a massive lead. They weren't a minute out front and able to just lift and coast to the line. They were, held between a 2 to 5 second lead over the rest of the pack, it seemed, for the majority of the race. But I mean, let me find, I think I had the stat here. It was something like 102 of the 111 laps completed in the race were led by the number 9 Pfaff car. So, I mean, that's wow, pretty spectacular. So a great weekend for the crew.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you got to think, Hayley, that Matt Campbell and Mathieu Jaminet, they must be on cloud 9 at the moment. They're leading the IMSA Championship. They've got a Daytona win in their pocket. Critically, they've got a Porsche factory prototype contract with Team Penske in their pocket. They must be absolutely floating right now with how things are going.
Absolutely on cloud 9. I do believe in like winning momentum though. I do think you kind of, you get a real kind of momentum and you get like complicity as well with your teammate. And I definitely think they had that. Christensen does give me those vibes, which are good vibes obviously to have. But yeah, I mean, all for them. I mean, you know how much of a fan I am of Jaminet.
As much of a fan as you are of Julian Andler.
Oh,
we've lost it. That was not the time to lose Hayley's audio.
That's right.
The joys of internet connection.
Yeah.
I mean, one comment, Tim, which I thought was really telling. Steve Bortolotti, the team manager for Pfaff, they're having a fantastic time racing as a full pro car. This is the first season we've seen Pfaff do that, having 2 factory drivers in the car. And, they're up against Corvette Racing, who are such a staple of global endurance racing, have been for such a long time. And Steve, one quote that really stood out to me in a report on sportscar365.com, and it said, and I quote, it says, "We love racing against the best GT team on the planet is in Corvette Racing." I mean, I'm going to ask both of you if you agree with that statement, but I'll start with you, Tim. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I think it's obviously I can't go into too much on the Porsche Sport podcast to elevate Corvette to be the best GT team in the world, but
I would say they are. I'll start off. I would say they are.
Just for opening the door. Okay, so Corvette, you see it time and time again at races. They get the big things right without even thinking about it, and they get the little things, those marginal gains that we always talk about in any form of sport. They just have it nailed. You watch a Corvette team pit stop. Rarely does anyone trip over anything, tire drop, something go wrong, pick up a penalty, lose that time. They're just so well oiled, and it must be amazing as someone who's investing money into a team, a privateer team, someone that comes from an automotive background, but isn't a born and bred racer, say, or isn't part of a program that is directed at racing, to be up against names like that. I think that's one of the beauties of this GTD Pro category is that it has been open to what you might want to say customer or privateer teams. And yeah, I completely agree with Steve Bortolotti's comments there. It must be amazing for him to be going up against big squads. It's easy to brush aside that there's a BMW factory team there as well that, maybe having a difficult season, and obviously their eyes are set forward onto the LMDH program, but 2 big factory squads there, heart of racing as well. Another crew that you'd put in the Pfaff kind of bracket as well. Yeah, I think it's just great to see. And the performance at the weekend just solidifies their status as one of the best squads in GTD Pro, and it has been in GTD as a category in the last few years. And I mean, I think anyone would be smiling and cheering if they were beating Corvette with their own car.
Hayley, you've seen Corvette racing up at close quarters a couple of times now at Le Mans, which is a race that's becomes a huge part of what they do. I mean, with the rule change at Le Mans, we're not going to see Corvette racing at Le Mans anymore in the current guise we know it as a full factory team. I mean, it's the end of an era. What in your experience, being up close to the team, what did you observe that make them such an impressive outfit and so hard to beat for everyone else, including Porsche?
What I like about Corvette is their dynamic. I like their the garage, what it's like in the garage. It's obviously very American, which we're not used to, basically. I'm not anyway. And to have another kind of, as I say, a dynamic with, I feel really bad, I can't remember her name.
It's double-barreled name.
Yeah, exactly. A fantastic woman there.
I can spot Tim Googling right now. I can see her.
Is it Laura von Trop-Klauser?
That's it. Well done. Yeah,
Gold
fantastic.
star.
She is an integral part of that dynamic, and I actually really like their spirit. Like, I don't know how to kind of describe it very precisely, but I'm very fond of how they work, how they function, and of course I was gutted for them at the 24 Hours of Le Mans after their incident with Perodo, which basically knocked them out of the race. But yeah, I think that is good, and going back to what. And so he was so happy that they confirmed that they were doing a whole competitive season with WEC, because to have such a prestigious team taking part, and to the fact that even your competitors are happy to have you there, because it's a real sign of it's a great how do I say, stamp. It's just it's great to see, and it will be a shame that they won't be there at 24 Hours anymore in the GT category next year. My internet connection is unstable. I hope you can hear me. Anyway, but yeah, as I say, I think I fully agree with you. They are a very well-oiled, well-organised team with personality.
Yes, they are. That's what I like about them as well. They have very distinct personality. Let's move on to talk about going back stateside again. One of the first teams to announce the purchase of a Porsche 963 to go prototype racing is, to me, a little bit of a surprise. JDC Miller Motorsports, who have run Cadillacs in the DPI category for quite a while now, and they have put up their $2.9 million to buy a Porsche LMDH 963 car. Tim, I mean, tell us your thoughts about this deal, and how do you think they'll fare against the might of Team Penske?
Yeah, I think you set it off there in the perfect way. I myself was quite surprised to see this name announced. It was the first customer officially announced after the Friday Goodwood reveal of the 963. It was then the Saturday, the day after, that we learned of JDC Miller becoming customer. I was surprised to see them move away from Cadillac, purely just because they'd been with Cadillac since 2019. You would feel there's a bit of a relationship there. They've won races. The Sebring 12-hour last year is a pretty big deal for them. They already always seem to have a lot of support and a lot of, emphasis behind the team. And I was surprised to see them jump away from that. But I wonder whether that was, how to put this? I wonder whether it was the right call for them. It's been the last couple of years, they've maybe fallen behind people like Whelen Engineering, Action Express. And I wonder whether, and with Chip Ganassi as well coming in to run the Cadillac Racing DPI VRs in IMSA, it's easy to place them as the, almost the fourth, fifth team down the list. That they're not quite keeping up in this last year of the DPI formula, I'd say. So I reckon it was a good time for a change. I'd be really excited to see what this car, looks like as well. I think we all love to see different liveries on new cars, especially when it's customer teams, things like that. My one question mark over it is driver lineup. Obviously, everyone talks about driver lineup with this, but the three drivers that have been almost a staple at JDC Miller over the last couple of years. Obviously, we've had Sebastian Bourdais was there 2019, but he'll be off, we presume, doing Cadillac things. At the moment, Tristan Vautier and Richard Westbrook share the car in IMSA rounds, but Westbrook, you could assume, might be sticking around with Glickenhaus into 2023. Wonder whether there will be an opportunity for him to represent Porsche and Glickenhaus in two different championships. That might be a question mark. Loic Duval, who's been their endurance driver, he's obviously now with Peugeot. You can imagine that his contract will be pretty binding to him representing the French line only. And so that leaves Tristan Vautier, who I could see them keeping on, but I wonder if there's a seat there to be filled alongside him and who that might be, and whether there's, opportunity for someone American, someone stateside maybe to pick up a drive, or indeed someone like Hayley mentioned earlier, FIA, to find themselves into a Porsche seat elsewhere. But yeah, fundamentally, very excited to see JDC Miller with a different car, different badge, and to see how they get on. And I think there'll be a number of customer cars in IMSA next year, and it will be a real test of their quality to see how they stand up against factory teams and customers alike.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I mean, Pfaff have expressed their wish to do so, but not until 2024 at the earliest. However, Steve Bortolotti again made some very interesting comments about waiting to see what the real world running costs will be. You can project it as much as you want, but often in practice it can be quite different. And there's a lot of unknowns with the car. I mean, there's been figures mooted of, a running cost of $5 to $7 million for a season. I don't think you can do it. I think you'd struggle to do Daytona and Sebring for that, to be honest. I think these cars are going to be a lot more expensive to run than people are maybe initially thinking. I mean, $2.9 million to buy the car in the first place, it gives you an idea how much spares package you're going to need. I mean, for context, back in 2007, an RS Spider would cost 1.2 million euros, and the recommended spare package was 9 million euros. So, it gives you an idea of kind of what it could be. I don't know.
I want to add to that point, Peter, as well. I wonder whether this opportunity came about because, we've seen a lot of conversation about supply chain issues. Has been a phrase thrown around with the kickoff to this new era, and obviously one of the brands set to use Multimatic chassis was Audi, and we've seen that Audi plan pretty much all but cancelled. Wonder whether that's freed up a few Multimatic chassis. So, i.e., there might be the chassis that were going to be allotted to Audi cars are now available for Porsche to use. So you wonder whether that's kind of knocked the door open. But then, say JDC Miller were looking at, wanting to re-sign with Cadillac. Cadillac's LMDH GTP, we'll call it LMDH, is a Dallara chassis, BMW's Dallara chassis. That's already 4 chassis they need. We've heard that, Porsche were looking at 8 tops. Wonder if those were, like, say, Audi chassis anyway. So I wonder whether there was just not enough Cadillacs to go round, or, not enough chassis for them to maybe get their hands on. And so with an opportunity or an extra car available at Porsche, whether that's enough to move them on. It's quite interesting to see how these, like you say, the money, the real world problems of paying for things, of literally getting the thing shipped and arriving on time, impacts teams' decisions to who they go with. If they really want to be part of it in 2023, or they're happy to wait another year, or even look beyond that to 2025, that, I don't know, impetus, that interest, how that might sway their decisions to hop ship.
It's an interesting one, Hayley. I mean, on the European side, what was the chat in the paddock? There's a lot of big teams in the European Le Mans Series paddock who have got big ambitions. Any snippets that you picked up on over the weekend at Monza of where we look at for future with hypercar and stuff?
Yeah. Have I cut out again? Because I'm just seeing okay. Actually, the problem is I don't know how much of what I actually know is confidential or not, because I was speaking to one driver who's going to be going to Alpine next year, because Alpine will be in LMP2. And I'm not sure if I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not. But anyway, there's a driver that's going to drive for Alpine next year.
There you go. An Alpine car will be driven by a driver. Excellent. So you've heard it here first. Breaking news. Wow. French driver drives.
Who was in Monza for one of the races. Yeah, I mean, as we all know, Alpine are going to be doing, next year is going to be LMP2, and then the year after it's going to be hypercar. I mean, there is so much, there's a real excitement in the paddock because, there is with hypercar, there are so many opportunities opening up for all the drivers. So everyone wants to prove themselves. There's all of a sudden this huge, opportunity that every single one of those drivers wants to seize. Come on, I mean, it's what a great class to open. Everyone is so excited for it. The number of times in Le Mans, people are like, can you imagine next year what it's going to be like? Oh my gosh, it's just so much excitement surrounding it. So yeah, I mean, I'd be wrong in saying that. I'd be right in saying that it's just so much potential, and everyone wants to, be a part of it. But as I said, unfortunately, I don't know who I can what information I can part with. But anyway, I did see one of the drivers there who, I can confirm.
But it's interesting to hear about the interest that's there. The only thing that my concern is, Tim, playing devil's advocate slightly, is there is only a certain number of cars get to race at Le Mans every year. It's done on invite. That process is what it is. It's invite by committee. There are some criteria in place, but there's a lot of dubiety in it. Are we going to see teams who have bought a £3 million or $3 million race car? They've hired top drivers, and then they don't get an invite for Le Mans. I mean, how important is that going to be? What are we heading for there, do you reckon?
Yeah, we're heading for a lot of paperwork, and I think a lot of potentially upset teams who might not bag themselves a space. Obviously, there are rules as well that we've seen the WEC bring in the last kind of year in a outright and then kind of bended rule way and whatever about needing to have a full-time car if you want to race at Le Mans as well. Full-time car in the WEC if you want to race at Le Mans. So, are brands to begin with going to have to start stumping up money to try and get a car in Europe if they want to bag that spot at Le Mans? You could say Cadillac are already doing that. I think it's only going to be one Cadillac in the hypercar class next year. And then does that open the door to them bringing their other car over from the States? Does that open the door to Cadillac customers being involved? I think it's going to be a bit of a messy one. My concern, if someone's car is fundamentally bad and even Bob can't save them and they don't want to invest in getting a new one up and running, I wonder, could we get only 2-3 years out of some of these manufacturers before they have a bit of a boom and bust? Yeah. I am very conscious of that. It's very, that sounds quite a pessimistic view on it. But, like you say, just to buy the car is 2.9 million euros or dollars, whatever, that's a lot of money for whoever it is to invest. And even if it's just a manufacturer in terms of making the actual car. I'm very interested to see the politics play out and to how people, really get stuck into this new era, particularly, like you say, with Le Mans entries, which is what everyone wants. But even worse, say you haven't got a car that's going to perform when you get there, is it going to be worth your money?
Hayley, how do you see that political side playing out?
Honestly, I couldn't add anything to what Tim just said. I completely agree with what he said. I think, as you said, it's going to be a lot of paperwork, and I can't even begin to imagine what that will mean and what that represents bureaucratically. But yeah, and as you said, there are only so many seats for Le Mans and for the category. So yeah, is it going to mean people are going to be, fighting for seats? I don't know. But yeah, I think that it's, as we all know, it's never easy with regulations and, switching from one to the other and such like. So it's going to be, as regards bureaucratically, it's going to be complicated.
Yes, I think that's a good way to summarise it. That's for sure. Well, it's great to catch up, folks, on all things IMSA, ELMS, and looking ahead as well. The future is bright. I think that would be fair to say for Porsche, both in GT and in prototype competition. Do get in touch with us here on the show in the Porsche Sport podcast. If you've got any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss on the show, do let us know through the Porsche Sport social media channels. Don't forget, of course, to subscribe via your chosen podcast provider. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been really lucky with some fantastic interview guests as well. They're all on the archive, so do check them out. But from us all here at the Porsche Sport podcast, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
The Porsche Sport Podcast, powered by Porsche Centre Leeds. Test drive the new Porsche Taycan and experience soul electrified.